Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Darrell Dukes podcast. I am your host, Darrell Dukes. This week, we're going to kick off the podcast with the Trump presidency. Now, earlier this week, but as a matter of fact, let's hold up on that. Let's talk about his Supreme Court nominee, then we're going to move on to the bans. Now, note as of, if I'm not mistaken, last week, Donald Trump put up a nominee to replace Justice Scalia's seat that has been vacated for nearly 1 year. Now, note, if you remember somewhat on how President Obama had his nominee that didn't even get a single hearing on his nomination to be the next Supreme Court Justice, President Trump made the announcement that Judge Neil Gorsuch, Gorsuch, hopefully I'm saying the last name right, is his nominee. Now, note, here's a couple things you probably didn't know about the judge. He could be the 113th potential justice. Now, note, as a little back fact, if your nominee to become a Supreme Court judge, you're there for life. No ifs, ands, or but, you are there for life, and there's nothing nobody can say about it. Because why? Because of reasons. He grew up in Colorado but moved to D.C. when his mom was appointed by President Reagan to run the Environmental Protection Agency, or also known as the EPA. He's 49 years old, and if confirmed, he could be the youngest justice that has been nominated to the Supreme Court. And he is also the 5th graduate out of the wonderful Harvard University, meaning that if you go to Harvard, there's a good chance you may be a judge or a Supreme Court justice one day. And he also believes in constitutional originalism, which we'll have the definition for you with the matter of, hopefully by the matter of next podcast, on constitutional originalism. So that's one thing that 33 million people were watching on that day when he decided to make that announcement in prime time, meaning that all your local programs, prime time programs, got pushed back half an hour to make room for the major announcement. Now, sticking with that, you're probably thinking, why on earth every news outlet or cable outlet decided to air the speech? Because one, like I mentioned, Justice Scalia died nearly a year ago, and there's been 2 nominees, one by then President Obama, and now by current President Trump. However, President Obama's nominee from the Supreme Court didn't even get no type of hearing whatsoever. Then basically it faded to black, and nobody really remembers who his name was that got nominated. And now, since it's a newsworthy thing that somebody decided to nominate a justice who again sits there for life, that ended up becoming big news. In addition to that, the reason why this took up prime time, because the president automatically doesn't get he has to ask the networks, his rep asks the networks that he'll be on a certain time if they could carry one of you to go through that process, because even though you may be the president of the United States, not everything you said goes on the broadcasting networks. Granted, we have 24 hours news networks like MSNBC, Fox, and CNN, but when it comes down to something like that major and newsworthy, it'll be broadcasted on every major news outlet there is, including the broadcast networks. So that's why it made prompts and circumstance when we found out that he was going to get nominated, and wanted the public to know. Now, this current week, if I could find it here, somewhere here in my notes, the Muslim ban. Now, note, Donald Trump earlier this week decided to ban travelers and immigrants from 7 different Middle Eastern countries overseas. Now, note, As a result of this, 60,000 people had their visas canceled, and White House spokesperson Sean Spence gave a quote to CBS News, and I quote, "Will file an emergency stay of this hearing of the will file an emergency stay of this outrageous order and defend the executive order of the president." Or in other words, I am going to do my damnness to make sure that this order goes into play, and there's nothing you or some judge can do about it. Now, there was two judges who basically say that no, this is not going to happen, and temporarily halted the ban on the immigrants from 7 different countries. And now this started to take shape. Let me rephrase myself. I had a momentary loss of thought there. This started to change itself because there's also college students who come here from different countries who are most likely part of those 7 different Middle Eastern countries, and they were strongly affected by this. Why? Because if they're trying to travel here for college, good luck. Not going to happen. And I also read about this one report, rather, a lady was given birth to her child, and her husband, who happens to live overseas but work here on a visa, didn't get to see the birth of his child, which, everybody had a right to be upset, because, it's very important to see, for a dad to see the birth of a child. But another thing is that if you're from a Middle Eastern country, or those 7 different Middle Eastern countries, good luck, because at the time you wasn't going to get into the United States, no way, shape, or form whatsoever. And as a result of that, there was protests around LAX and some other parts of the world. No, I did not misspoke. The parts of the world like London, England to be example, were protesting about this ban. Even James Corden, host of the Late Late Show on CBS, he flew out of LAX, walked through the protesters to demonstrate that, me, a guy from the UK that's been here for a couple years now, hosting a late night talk show, could walk freely. Why can't my brothers and sisters and overseas and the immigrants come over here and travel freely as I can? So he did a nice little piece on that. And my take on this is this. It's only in week 3, which I didn't realize it was week 3 already of the Trump presidency. Trump is basically saying, screw you, Congress, I'm going to do this my way, the way I want to do it, the Donald Trump's way, because of the fact he knows how politicians are, even though, sure, his vice president is a politician, and the Speaker of the House, who's after the vice president, is a politician. He wants to get done his way and only his way, and be damned if somebody tried to stop him. So we'll see how far that goes. Now, there was one particular story and that came across my attention. But first, let me give you a little story. My senior year in high school, there was this teacher by the name of Professor Rosario. Now, note the reason I'm giving him the title professor, because he was also a professor at Miami-Dade College and in the Miami area. He was also, again, this was 2012, was my teacher at Coral Reef Senior High School. He was my math teacher my senior year, and well-respected guy. He was what men consider what I'm considering the Michael Jackson of math, because there's not one problem he can solve with, making it simple for people like me who treats math like a foreign language, don't know what, who, what, where, and all this other stuff. It was reported by both WFOR, by 3 stations in Miami. It'll be exact here. WFOR, WTVJ, and WSVN, that Bernard Rosario was arrested. Like I mentioned, he was a former teacher at Coral Reef Senior High School. He was also, at the present time before he got arrested, teacher at Cutler Bay High School, which, again, I lived in Cutler Bay for a few years. I didn't even know they had a high school in the general area, but I digress. While being arrested, Osorio admitted to having oral sex with who's now a 17-year-old, but at the time he was 15. This happened on 3 different occasions, 2 times on school grounds and 1 time in Mr. Osorio's personal vehicle. Mr. Osorio had been a teacher for more than 2 decades, and upon learning the arrest, the Miami-Dade School Board has fired Mr. Rosario, and also he has been banned from teaching in that school district. Now, like I mentioned, Mr. Rosario was a teacher of mine in my senior year in high school. Great man, well-respected man. When I found out this, I was shocked that this happened to a guy like him. But, I mean, what else can you say? The guy was, he was well-respected, well-liked, and many people had their suspicions about him, that he was too friendly, but we didn't know that it was going to go to this extreme. So for that, I am, like I mentioned on my Facebook page, I'm deeply saddened and shocked that this happened, and hopefully he could rebound for this if they give him bail, because right now he currently is sitting in jail on no bond whatsoever. Now, the final thing we're going to talk about today on the DDP is Orlando Victorian Comic-Con. As you've seen on the Facebook, for both on my Facebook, for my professional Facebook rather, which you can search Darrell R. Dukes and like and follow all that other good stuff. I interviewed a couple people there, and I really had a great time. However, this is one thing that I didn't get a chance to reveal. I was in the artist's room where the special guest was at, and the show's organizer, Mike of Mike's Comics, pulled me to the side, and I was thinking, okay, I didn't do nothing wrong. I'm just a reporter trying to get the story into the people doing what I've been doing for the last almost 12 years or so. Mike asked me if I were with anybody, and I told him, no sir, I am a freelance. And he's like, oh, okay, just don't interview none of the artists. Which, totally understandable. But in a way, and again, I could be wrong, I'm just going under assumption here, that he could have been threatened by me. I mean, let's face it, the last thing you need to see at your own con, is a journalist with a mic interviewing people, and that could potentially be interviewing special guests that came there on their own spare time. Now, granted, I am trying my best to have Mr. Mike to do a sit-down one-on-one interview with me. I have emailed them before, but I haven't gotten no response, so I will try back again at some given point to email them and have them on the podcast to talk about how he got started in comics and stuff of that nature. Also at the Orlando Victorian Comic-Con, I got the chance to run in with Big J, Jonathan Ortiz of Big J's Toys, and he has a new location set up. Hopefully once he gets back on the ground, we'll be able to have a nice little interview with him on how his new location is going, stuff of that nature, and that hopefully will be soon. It won't be right away because again, he just recently signed the contract not too long ago and is currently on a middle mini vacation. But rest assured, I will do my best to have Mr. Ortiz back on the Darrell Dukes podcast for another sit down, as well as Mike of Mike's Comments rather. The owner to sit down with me for a one-on-one interview, and like I said, I tried to contact him in the past, then I seen he didn't get back to me, but rest assured we will have him back on the podcast at some given point. So that'll do it for this edition of the Darrell Dukes podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Dukes, and until we meet again, friends, stay gold.